Hey guys, tonight we begin with the strange, silent inheritance every girl received in the Middle Ages. A life outlined before birth, whispered behind closed doors, and tightly wrapped in velvet doctrine. You are born in a narrow bed, beneath a thatched roof, into a world that has already decided most of your future. You're a girl, and that fact alone charts a path lined, not with choices, but with expectations. You're swaddled, not only in cloth, but in silence. And by the time you're old enough to speak, you've already learned which questions not to ask. The church, your town's moral compass, your family's guidebook. Your invisible warden has decided for you what matters. It speaks in sermons and shadows. Women must be quiet, obedient, modest. The best among them are invisible, not heard, not curious, and certainly not opinionated. There is no official lesson plan for this, no pamphlet passed around, and yet, somehow, you learn. Your mother doesn't explain much. She doesn't need to. Her silences speak louder. When you ask why the baker's wife is whispering to the midwife behind the water well, your mother gives you a look and the question dies in your throat. You'll try again one day, and maybe again after that. But eventually, like most girls, you stop asking by the age of 5. You've already absorbed more rules than rhymes. Don't lift your skirts too high. Don't run. Don't speak unless spoken to. Sit with your knees together and your eyes down. Don't smile at the stable boys, and definitely don't listen to the widow 3 cottages down. She talks too much, knows too much, and walks like she remembers when she was free. In church, you sit near the front, not because you're holy, but because women don't get to. Sit in the back, that's for the men. Behind them are the boys, then the girls, and then, at the front, where everyone can see your posture and your piety, the priest talks of sin, of restraint, of Eve, and her disastrous curiosity. You wonder, very faintly, what she wanted to know so badly. The thought lingers longer than you'd like, but you don't ask. Even thinking about it makes you feel the heat of the priest's eyes. You're too young to understand much, but you understand tone, and the tone is clear. Curiosity is dangerous, especially in girls, especially when it comes to your body, your thoughts, your wants. You're taught that virtue isn't about kindness or cleverness. It's about silence, and your worth will be measured by how little you disturb the world around you. By the time you reach 7, considered the age of reason, you've been taught to pray, but not to question. You know the saints by name. You don't know where babies come from. You suspect it's something embarrassing. You know there are things women whisper about. You just don't know what they are. And again, you don't ask. A traveling friar visits the village. He speaks to the crowd of sin and shame, of purity and punishment. He never says the word body. He never needs to. You look around and see other women nodding. No one seems surprised. You wonder if you're supposed to feel guilty for something, but you're not sure what. Still, you feel it anyway. That's how shame works. It doesn't wait for clarity. It just arrives. Your brother gets different lessons. He's praised for strength, for confidence, for curiosity. He asks about the stars, and your father beams. You ask if women go to heaven faster, since they pray more, and everyone goes quiet. Then your mother coughs, and someone changes the subject. The first time you see an animal give birth, you're told not to look. When you catch a glimpse anyway, your aunt scolds you, but the stable boy just laughs. He tells you that's nature. You remember that? The word sounds bold in his mouth. Natural, normal, but not for you. Later that night, you ask your older cousin if it hurts, whatever it is that happens between husband and wife. She stiffens, says nothing, then mutters, "You'll find out." That's all. No comfort, no detail, no warning. Just a sentence that feels like a sealed door. No one teaches you about pleasure. No one explains desire. You hear about saints who died, virgins and women who married Christ instead of men. They are the examples held up for you, pure, bloodless, divine. No one ever mentions if they were happy. That, you come to realize, is irrelevant. Your body begins to change. You feel strange things heat in your chest, a fluttering in your belly, a dream you can't explain. You don't tell anyone. You don't even have the words for it. You begin to suspect that your body is something separate from you. Something embarrassing. Something that can get you in trouble. You notice how the village stares more now. How old women whisper if your neckline shifts. How your father watches the way boys look at you. You feel eyes on your shoulders, on your hands, on your walk. You start to walk smaller. You pull your shawl tighter. You try to shrink into yourself. There are women who walk boldly, a widow who laughs too loudly, a healer who lives on the edge of the village, a merchant's wife who dares to speak first. You admire them, and then you're warned about them. Not directly, but you hear your aunt mutter about reputation. You hear your grandmother sigh and say she was always too curious. That word again. You begin to suspect that much of what makes a woman bad has to do with asking, knowing, or wanting something she's not supposed to. And you begin to understand that being good means the opposite. Being silent, still, selfless. You wonder if it's possible to be good and happy. You're not sure. No one tells you. At night, when the village is quiet, you think about your future. You'll marry, of course. You'll be expected to bear children. But what happens? In between is a dark space no one talks about. A series of things that are hinted at, joked about, but never explained. You fear it, but you're also curious, and that scares you more. One day, you find a book in the rectory left open by accident. It's not meant for you. It's in Latin, but you recognize a few words. Sign, flesh, shame. You close it fast. Your hands feel dirty just touching the pages. You remember Eve. You don't ask again, and yet, some part of you still wonders. You're about 8 years old when the lesson really sinks in. The less you say, the more you're praised. It starts small. You sit at the table while the adults talk. Your cousin interrupts, loud and eager. He's told to hush, but with a smile. Boys will be boys. Then you quietly pass the bread without speaking. Then you hear it. Such a good little lady. Just like that, you're rewarded for vanishing. No one hands you a scroll and declares these are the rules, but you learn anyway. You absorb them in glances, in sighs, in the sharpness of a shushed whisper. You ask what happens after marriage. Your aunt purses her lips. You'll learn soon enough. You ask why the priest never speaks to women in confession the same way he does to men. Because women already know what they should, says your mother, folding linens. You ask what happens to girls who run away. They come back pregnant, someone mutters. You're being taught not through facts, but through fear. You begin to notice what gets women scolded. A neighbor who laughs too loud, a girl who looks a boy in the eye, a woman who dares to wear color when she's not a bride. These are not sins written in scripture, but they're treated just as seriously. When you cry, they tell you to control yourself. When your brother cries, they say he's passionate. When you ask questions, you're nosy. When he does, he's curious. You learn that intelligence is not unwelcome, but it must be quiet. A girl who reads is suspicious. A girl who debates is dangerous. A woman who argues with her husband, Evan, kindly is ungrateful. You're told that good wives don't raise their voices. They keep their homes orderly. They keep their children fed, and they keep their thoughts mostly to themselves. A local tale is passed around about a woman who scolded her husband too often. One night, he took her to the priest, who advised a discipline remedy. The next day, she was quieter. You don't ask what happened in between. You don't want to know. You'll learn about chastity belts not from history, but from horror stories. Better to be locked up than to be ruined. Someone says once, with a knowing nod. You think it's a metaphor. You hope it's a metaphor. There's a girl in your village who was caught meeting a boy in the fields. They say she seduced him. No one asks if he seduced her. The boy leaves for work in another town. The girl is sent away. Her name becomes a warning. You watch this happen and realize something unsettling. Your silence is a kind of shield. If you don't speak, you can't say the wrong thing. If you don't ask, you can't be accused of knowing too much. If you don't look, no one can say you were seeking attention. You begin to practice this discipline. At dinner, you keep your answers short. You nod instead of speaking. You smile when asked. You listen when the men debate the bishop's sermon, and you never comment heaven when you understand it better than they do. There is a word they use often in church: obedience. It echoes in the walls, in marriage vows, in sermons, in scripture. It always seems to fall heavier on your side of the aisle. You wonder why Mary is praised most, not for her thoughts or her bravery, but for her submission, her silence, her willingness to say, "Let it be done." You wonder if holiness is measured by how small you can make yourself. There's a book in the parish library, The Rule of Saint Benedict. You're not meant to read it, but you glimpse a line: speak only when necessary. You wonder if that applies to women more than men. You're fairly certain it does. You hear your mother speaking quietly one night to a neighbor. The baby is sick. The midwife came. She mentions an herb, something forbidden. They say it works, but the church disapproves. You're too far to hear the name of the herb, but you know, instinctively, not to repeat what you've heard. You carry more secrets than truths. When your first bleeding comes, it's not explained. You're handed cloth and told to be discreet. Don't let the boys know, your cousin warns. They'll think you're cursed. You laugh, then realize she's not joking. You become aware that your body is a symbol, a mystery, a potential problem. People talk about you like you're a holy relic that might crack if touched too hard or reveal something unclean if handled too carelessly. A married woman tells you, learn early, silence will keep you safe. Another whispers, it's not that men don't want to listen, it's that they don't want to remember you said anything. You are not taught what love means. You are taught what loyalty means: obedience, restraint, acceptance. You begin to suspect that love, as described in songs and stories, doesn't exist for people like you. It's reserved for noble women in troubadour ballads. The rest of you get duty. You see a woman punished for contradicting her husband at market. She corrected the price of fish. He corrected her with the back of his hand. No one intervened. The priest saw and said nothing. Later, someone says she provoked him. You memorize that phrase. You see another woman lead her donkey alone to the well. She wears shoes meant for a man and walks like she's not afraid. You wonder how long she'll last. Your world is one where fear is dressed as wisdom, where obedience is draped in lace and labeled feminine virtue, where silence is polished until it shines and sold to you as the highest form of strength. And even when you feel the words bubbling up when you want to ask, to challenge, to scream, you swallow them, because somewhere along the way, you were taught that a silent woman is safe. You don't believe it completely, but for now, you live like it's true. You are a teenager now. Your body continues to change, and your thoughts become harder to control. You wake up warm, flushed, confused. You dream of hands that don't exist, and voices you've never heard, but you don't speak of it. Not to your mother, not to the priest, not even to your reflection, because by now, you understand, whatever you're feeling isn't supposed to be real. No one has said the word pleasure to you, not once, not in school, not in church, not at the dinner table. The word doesn't exist in your world, not for women, and if it does, it wears a different name: sin. You know what words you are allowed: modesty, purity, grace, chastity, obedience. Everything else lives in the dark. You hear the boys joking behind the barn, using terms you barely understand. You're not sure what they mean. but you're sure they'd never say those things in front of the priest or their mothers. But you, as a girl, are supposed to act as though such thoughts are impossible, as though your body is a blank parchment. One day to be written on, but not by you. You remember a sermon where the priest shouted that the flesh is weak, that women must not tempt, that a wife's duty is to her husband, but never to herself. There's no mention of affection, no mention of kindness, only law, only regulation, only fear dressed as virtue. You're told that any physical desire, any feeling of warmth in the body or mind is unnatural for a woman. At best, it is a temptation. At worst, it's proof of your moral failure. You once ask a friend if she ever feels strange at night. She blushes deep red and says nothing, but you notice she avoids your eyes afterward, as if just acknowledging it has put both of you in danger. Still, curiosity flickers. You watch married women. You notice how they flinch when touched, how their faces remain still during embraces. You wonder if they were taught to suppress emotion so deeply that even now, within the safety of marriage, they can't find the joy in it. One woman tells you, if it brings a child, it is holy. If it brings a smile, be careful. You nod. You don't understand, but the sadness in her voice stays with you. Then, you find something unexpected. Behind a cracked panel in your grandmother's home, tucked under folded cloth, you discover a set of old pages, worn, handwritten, a secret record of knowledge passed between women. Not church doctrine, not medical scrolls, but something in between. It speaks of moon phases and body heat, of honey and lavender, of when not to lie with your husband if you wish to avoid pregnancy. It doesn't mention sin, it doesn't mention obedience, it doesn't apologize, and buried within it, softly, there is a sentence. Some women do feel joy, though they must hide it. It stops your breath. You read it again. You had not even considered that pleasure was possible, let alone real, let alone shared. You thought it was something men invented for themselves, and that women simply endured. Now you aren't sure what to believe. That sentence feels like rebellion, but even as your mind opens, the world stays the same. The priest still says that women who enjoy the act too much are cursed with lust, that laughter in the bedroom is a sign of demonic temptation, that excessive affection even within marriage is sinful. One bishop wrote that women should never speak of such things, that sacred duty must be performed without mirth, without delay, and without indulgence. He called it a burden and a test. You learned the preferred phrase, marital debt. That's what the church called it, not a gift, not intimacy, a debt by wife to husband, and collected without appeal, in confession. Women were sometimes asked how they responded during the act. Were they quiet? Were they modest? Were they still? If a woman admitted to wanting it, or enjoying it, some priests recommended penance. Some gave her herbs, and some simply stared, silently, letting the guilt do the work. Historians still argue whether these punishments were widespread or isolated to particular regions, but the records exist, and even a single recorded case was enough to keep generations afraid. Meanwhile, men spoke of pleasure more freely. They were allowed metaphors, wine, fire, thunder. But for you, pleasure is never wine. It is poison. It is shame. It is a rope that wraps tighter. The more you admit, you feel it. You recall a tale of a noblewoman accused of desiring her husband too frequently. He complained to the bishop. She was ordered to spend 40 days fasting, not for adultery, not for betrayal, for desire. Her name was removed from the family records. In some villages, if a woman was known to be passionate, midwives would advise her to chew bitter herbs or walk barefoot in the snow to purge her urges. Some were told to wear thorns beneath their shifts. Others were advised to pray every hour, on the hour. For forgiveness they didn't understand. You see the pattern. When a woman denies pleasure, she is virtuous. When she wants pleasure, she is dangerous, so you learn slowly to push the thoughts away. When your skin tingles, you distract yourself. When your breath quickens at night, you pray. You whisper Latin that doesn't soothe you, but covers the silence. Sometimes you look at your hands and wonder if they belong to you, if any part of you is truly yours, or if you're just a vessel built to serve. Smile and sleep in silence. But late at night, you remember the line. Some women do feel joy, though they must hide it. You don't know who wrote it, but it makes you feel less alone. You keep reading it until you know it by heart. The fire crackles quietly tonight as you pull the wool blanket up to your chin. It's not cold exactly, but there's a chill in the air, weight, more in the bones than in the room, and maybe that's fitting, because we're about to talk about the one thing heavier than any blanket ever could be in the medieval world, your virginity, and the role they've been shaping you for since birth. Not in the romantic sense, not as a love story, but as a long, slow march toward a single, inescapable event, your wedding night. From your very first steps, you're not walking toward freedom, you're walking toward fulfilling a role you didn't choose. Every gesture you're taught, every phrase you're allowed to speak, every glance you're told to lower, it's all shaping you for someone else's future, not yours. You're not born as a daughter in the eyes of your family. You're born as future currency. The local priest might smile at your family during feast days. He might pat your head when you recite prayers. But he also watches how high your sleeves are, how loud your laughter is, how straight you sit, because everyone is watching. They're measuring, assessing. As if your body were a jar of milk they might one day trade. And your father? He's a man who loves you, yes, but he also needs to secure the family's alliances, the land, the dowry. You are, whether he admits it or not, a pawn on a marriage board. Maybe a lucky one, maybe not. You're taught obedience before you're taught language. A quiet girl is a good girl. The bride who speaks too much shames her husband. A sealed mouth is the mark of a virtuous wife. It sounds harmless when you're 6. By 12, it's a script. By 16, it's a cage. Even your body isn't yours. Your clothes are stitched by hands that don't ask if you like the shape. Your hair is braided according to your father's rules. Your virginity, it's watched like a sacred relic, not because you understand it, but because it has value to them. And soon enough, the talk begins. They don't call it S3x, of course, not directly. They say things like duty or bridal responsibilities. Your mother speaks to you one evening while folding sheets, her eyes not quite meeting yours. She tells you to lie still, to close your eyes, that it will be over quickly. You want to ask why? You want to say, but shouldn't I get to know him first? But you already know the answer. Want doesn't belong to women like you. Your job isn't to desire, it's to receive without resistance. You are taught that your wedding night is not about your joy, or your comfort, or your understanding. It's about your success in performing a role, and that success measured in pain. Because if you don't cry out, if you don't wince, if you don't bleed, then they'll whisper, she wasn't a virgin. She must have known something before. She was too calm. And so you prepare, not for love, but for the performance. Your wedding dress is not white. Those wouldn't become tradition until centuries later. It might be blue, or crimson, or golden if you're wealthy. But it's not about color, anyway. It's about condition. You are being presented, and you are told implicitly, and sometimes directly, that your value will never again be this high, that you are at your best today, because tomorrow you'll be a wife, and wives don't belong to themselves. You're instructed to smile, but not too brightly, to be modest, but not so shy you look dull, to answer when spoken to, but to avoid seeming clever. It's a balancing act designed to keep you palatable, pleasant, passive, your family toasts to your future. But none of them mention that you've never been asked whether you want this, whether you trust the man who will now own your body, whether you even like his voice. Because in most cases, you don't know him at all. Among peasants, matches are made practically. He owns a field near your father's, or his ox is strong, or he helped repair your family's fence. And suddenly, he's your forever. Among the nobility, it's worse. You might be 12, he might be 40, and his interest isn't in your lineage. Marriage is not union, it's strategy. But once it happens, once the feast ends and the guests go home, the true test begins. You are escorted to the bridal chamber by women, sometimes older sisters, aunts, or even strangers appointed by the church. They undress you, whisper prayers, remind you to be still. Sometimes they hand you a small wooden cross, sometimes a glass of honeyed wine, and then he comes in, the husband. He might smile, he might not, he might say nothing, because this is duty, not romance. In some places, witnesses wait outside, not just to listen, but to inspect. Sheets, sounds, stains, yes, your pain is evidence of purity. No one asks how you feel, because this night isn't about you. It's about your value being confirmed. Some regions even held something called the bedding ceremony, where the newlyweds were placed into bed publicly, and the curtains drawn as everyone cheered. It was theater, awkward, terrifying, and enforced by custom. And let's say it goes badly. Let's say he's cruel, or clumsy, or drunk. If you cry, you're overreacting. If you stay quiet, you're too experienced. If you protest, you're failing your role, because the burden of proof was always on you. Now here's the twist. Even within marriage, pleasure was not encouraged. One 13th century guide instructed women to lie still as the grave and speak no words. Passion was considered a male trait. A woman who enjoyed S3x, suspicious. A woman who asked questions about it, dangerous. Historians still argue how much actual enforcement varied across classes. Among peasants, many couples had deeper bonds. They laughed, shared hard labor, and sometimes grew genuine affection. But even then, the expectations were clear. A wife must obey, submit, produce heirs, and if she didn't, well, barrenness could be grounds for annulment. That's right. If your body didn't conceive, it could be treated as failure. Some manuals blamed women entirely, suggesting they had cold wombs or loose morals. Others claimed that pleasure was necessary for conception, creating a cruel paradox. Enjoy it too much, and you're sinful. Don't enjoy it, and you're infertile. Either way, ... It's your fault. And if, heaven forbid, you conceived outside of marriage, your burden becomes your brand. Unwed mothers were punished, publicly forced to confess, whipped, or paraded with shaved heads through the village square. Even if the man vanished, even if it wasn't your choice, because this world didn't care about your story, only your status. Let's take a quiet breath here. Imagine sitting on the edge of your bed, centuries ago, fingers trembling, wondering if tonight will hurt, if it will change how people look at you, if you'll bleed enough, if you won't cry too loud, if you'll survive it, if you'll be believed. Because being a bride wasn't a celebration. It was a test, one you weren't allowed to fail, and that, ... was just night one. The bed is still warm from last night, but you lie awake, not from passion, not from comfort, but because you're beginning to realize nothing feels different. You're married now. You were told it would change everything, and in a way, it has. Your name is now linked to his. Your body legally is possession, but your heart, your thoughts, your fear, those are still very much your own, because medieval marriage isn't about love. It's about order, hierarchy, structure, legacy, land, and above all obedience. Let's pull the curtain back slowly. Let's look at what marriage truly meant. For a woman like you, in a time like this, you are not his equal. That was never even the premise. Marriage in the Middle Ages is not a union of souls. It's a legal contract, a social function, a religious duty on you. You're a participant, not a partner. The church makes it clear. Marriage is a sacrament, yes, but it's also an institution designed for procreation and moral control, not pleasure, not companionship, certainly not emotional intimacy. And that's where the story begins. You don't choose your husband. That's not your role. In some cases, your father signs a parchment with another father trading you for land, a political alliance, or an ox and 2 barrels of ale. In other cases, you're paired with a man because your families share a patron saint, or because his sister married your cousin. You're told he is a good match, not a kind man, not a gentle soul, just a match. Sometimes, you meet him for the first time at the altar, and even when there is affection or potential for it, two are warned, love is dangerous. It blinds, it confuses, it leads to sins of the flesh, so you learn early. Marry first, feel later, if at all. The vows are said in Latin. You don't understand every word, but you know the gist. You promise obedience, chastity within marriage, faithfulness, he promises, to provide. Maybe and then it's done. You're his now, before God, before witnesses, before the entire community, but you are not protected. Let that sink in. Marriage does not protect you from violence. It does not guarantee kindness. It does not assure respect. It guarantees structure. In fact, in most medieval legal systems, a husband has the right to correct his wife physically so long as he doesn't cause lasting damage. If he strikes you, you are told to pray, to be patient, to remember your vows. If he abandons you, the church may ask you to wait, sometimes for 7 years before declaring him dead. And even then, you may not remarry without approval. If he is cruel in bed, if he demands things you don't understand or don't enjoy, there is no court for that, because your pleasure is not the purpose. Remember, the marriage contract is not about you. It's about keeping society running smoothly. You are now part of a machine. You tend his home, bear his children, warm his bed. But if he never speaks to you with tenderness, if he never looks into your eyes, that's not seen as failure. That's simply normal. If you complain, you are seen as disobedient. If you cry, you're over-emotional. If you rebel, a wife like that invites the devil. And yet, there are rare cases, whispers of women who had love matches, who laughed with their husbands, who walked together in the garden, who kissed gently by candlelight. But those stories are soft and scarce, faint echoes in the corner of the medieval world. For most, marriage is duty. Even legal texts from the time, like Gratian's Decretum or canon law commentaries, treat marriage like a transaction. A woman must be given by her male guardian. The consent is debated, but in practice, your voice holds little weight. And what if you say no? That depends. In theory, forced marriage is against church teaching, but in practice, a girl's silence is often taken as consent, especially if there are political gains involved. And if you resist too strongly, your family may send you to a convent, or worse, declare you mad, possessed, unfit for society. In noble families, girls as young as 12 are married off. Why? Because that's the legal age of consent under canon law. Yes, 12. You might not even have your first period yet, but you'll have your husband, and you'll be expected to fulfill your duties. No one tells you what those duties really mean, not in words. They're taught in glances, in chores, in quiet corrections. You'll feel them most acutely on wedding night, of course. But after that, they don't end. They expand. Every time you refuse, you risk being called frigid, difficult. Some manuals even warn husbands that unwilling wives can cause spiritual harm. Yes, your disobedience might endanger his soul, so you give in, again and again, and if you fail to conceive, that's your failure too. There's a quiet war between wives and midwives, between prayers and powders, between God's will and human desperation. Women try everything: pilgrimages, potions, relics of saints to become mothers, because if you don't bear children, your status crumbles. A barren wife is a social problem. A fertile woman is a blessing. It doesn't matter how unhappy you are, because marriage is not supposed to make you happy. It is supposed to keep you useful. Let's pause here. Breathe. Think of a woman, maybe like you, staring out the tiny window of a stone house. Her husband is away for weeks. Her body aches, her mind even more. She doesn't know what joy is supposed to feel like. She only knows compliance. And yet, there are small rebellions, soft ones. A whispered joke with another wife at the well. A quiet song sung while baking bread. A carved heart on a hidden beam. Moments where the soul stirs, where the self tries to breathe again. But those are dangerous, too, because if you begin to feel, you begin to question, and questioning is a privilege you were never meant to have. That's why, even within marriage, love is risky. It makes you want, and in this world, a woman who wants is already in trouble. So what do? You adjust. You smile at feasts. You keep the fire burning. You learn to interpret his moods. You raise the children. You nod during sermons. You become what they need. And maybe, someday, he will look at you kindly. Maybe he'll bring you a ribbon from the market. Maybe he'll call you by a gentle name. But maybe not. And you'll still stay, because leaving isn't an option. Not legally, not spiritually, not socially. Marriage is forever, even if it leaves you hollow. Even if you've never once known what it means to be loved for who you are. Even if the only safety you've ever felt was in a moment like this, quiet, alone, with no one watching, just you, and the knowledge that deep within you, even in this world of rules and contracts, you still exist. Even if no one else sees you, you are there. The door closes behind you with a heavy wooden groan, a sound that feels final. The room is lit only by a single tallow candle, flickering shadows across the stone walls. You stand still, your hands cold, your breath shallow, your thoughts a tangle. Tonight is the night they all whispered about, and yet no one ever told you what it truly means. You are dressed in white linen, thin as breath, perfumed with lavender and ash. The matrons bathed you earlier, scrubbed your skin until it stung. They braided your hair with silver thread, then giggled softly when you asked, "What happens after the feast?" But they never answered. Just a knowing look, a nod, and silence. That's what you've had the most of, silence. Even your mother, especially your mother, could not meet your eyes. She adjusted your veil, kissed your forehead, whispered something about duty and grace, but she did not prepare you. Not really. There was the priest, of course, earlier in the chapel, before the ceremony. He looked at you kindly, spoke of sacred union, reminded you to submit with humility and joy. But even he never said how. And so now, here you are, alone. Except not really. You hear his footsteps before you see him. Your husband, a man you barely know. A man who ate roast boar across from you at the wedding feast, laughing with your father, drinking deeply, never once asking if you were tired or afraid. And now he is here, in this room, in this moment, with you. You wonder if he feels nervous. He doesn't look it. He doesn't ask you anything. He lifts your veil without a word. You keep your eyes down, just as you were told. A good wife does not meet a man's gaze too boldly, especially not tonight. His fingers are rough. His breath smells of wine. He touches your shoulder lightly, then with more intent, and suddenly, your body is not yours anymore. No one prepared you for this. Not the church, not the women, not the books you were never allowed to read. You don't know where to put your hands. You don't know how to breathe. You feel the bed behind your knees, the sheets still stiff with starch. You lie down because he expects you to, because they said you should. You close your eyes and pray to the Virgin Mary, even though something about that feels cruel. The pain surprises you. It is sharp, real, undeniable. It is not what they said it would be. A pinch, a moment, just awkward. It feels like being broken open. He does not stop. Why would he? This is his right. The priest blessed this. The law affirms this. The whole village expects this. Outside, someone might be waiting to see the bloodied sheet. Proof of your virtue. Proof that your body was unspoiled before tonight. You are not supposed to cry, but tears come anyway. Soft, silent, shameful. You try to think of holy things, of saints, of prayers, of anything other than what's happening. But nothing saves you from the truth. You were not prepared. And that wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. Because your ignorance was part of the design. A pure girl is an uninformed girl. The less you know, the more pliant you'll be. The more good, the more modest. You were never taught that intimacy could be mutual. You were taught that it was his right and your role. And now you understand why your mother couldn't speak. Why her eyes welled with something unspeakable. When she looked at you this morning, not because she didn't know what would happen, but because she did. You are not angry. Not yet. That comes later, if it ever comes at all. For now, you just lie still. You wait for it to be over, and when it is, he rolls away without a word. He falls asleep. His breath loud, his limbs slack. You stare at the ceiling. You listen to your own heartbeat. You feel the ache between your legs. You feel the wetness, blood, maybe, or not. You are too numb to check. You are married now. This is what it means. You remember your wedding vows, to love, honor, and obey. But no one said what love looks like in the dark. No one said what honor feels like when you are silent and sore. No one said how to obey when your body is screaming inside. You begin to understand why some women prefer the convent, why some never speak of their wedding night. Why older women laugh in that hard, bitter way when girls say, "I can't wait to be a wife." You are not dead, but something has shifted inside you. Something has closed. Tomorrow, you will wake up and begin your new life. You will smile at the cook, kiss your husband's hand. You will learn to manage the household. You will fold linens. You will bear children. You will become the woman you were expected to be. But tonight, you are still just a girl who didn't know. And now, you do. Not from a book, not from a lesson, not from a warning, but from experience, from silence, from pain. And in this still moment, with the candle nearly out, you whisper not a prayer, but a question. Why didn't anyone tell me? And in the quiet, no one answers. Because in this world, they never do. What women were taught about S3x in the Middle Ages, you won't believe it. You find it tucked behind a stack of psalters. Its binding is cracked, its pages frayed like lace, its ink faded, but legible. You shouldn't be holding this. This isn't. For women, it was written by monks, for confessors, for priests. But tonight, you open it anyway. Your candle flickers as your eyes scan the Latin, then the hand-scribbled margin notes, then the translated gloss in the back, probably added by a young scribe still learning penance formulas. What you read is not poetry, it is instruction, cold, precise, absolute, a list of rules, a ledger of do's and don'ts for intimacy. Not intimacy as you hoped it might be, but the church's version, a system of control. It begins simply, let no married couple lie together on feast days, on fast days, on Sundays, or during a woman's courses. You count the days, Sundays, that's 52, feast days, dozens more, Lent, Advent, add 40 days each. They've left you maybe 100 nights a year, nights when your body is allowed to be touched, and even then, It is only encouraged at another passage. It is a sin to seek pleasure from the marital act. The purpose is procreation only. You stop breathing. You read it again. Not because you didn't understand, but because you did. This is not about love, or connection, or comfort on a cold winter night. This is about utility. A woman's body is soil. The man is seed. The priest is the gardener, watching to ensure the harvest grows straight. You turn the page. There's a chart now. A literal table. Positions listed. Permissible or sinful. Marked. Recommended penance. Calculated. One line reads, from behind, unnatural. 15 days fasting. Another, standing, improper. 7 days penance. Then, if the woman speaks lustfully, or moves to assist, her sign is doubled. Your fingers go cold. You never imagined your own stillness might be part of the system. That your passivity was required. That your silence wasn't just social, it was spiritual. You suddenly remember what the older widow in the village once said: lie still. Let him do what he must. Think of your soul. You thought she was being cruel. Now you realize she was quoting doctrine. You turn the page again. Here, the text shifts. It is a confession manual now. It lists the questions a priest must ask a woman. Have you lain with your husband more than is proper? Did you think of pleasure? Did you resist the conjugal act? Did you experience delight and hide it? Each question is followed by a required penance. Some light 3 Hail Marys. Some severe bread and water for a week. One entry even mentions flagellation. For what? For being human. For feeling something. For wanting to feel. You close the book. Your hands tremble slightly. You wonder, did your mother know this existed? Did she confess these things? Did the priest ask her if she moved too much under the blanket? You wonder if your husband knows about this book. Would he care? Would he mock it? Or would he use it, quote, it to remind you that even your thoughts can be sins? And most of all, you wonder why no one ever gave you this rule book before your wedding night. Because now, it's too late now. You're already married. Already expected to obey. Already presumed guilty if you flinch the wrong way. Or feel a spark when his hand brushes your waist. There's no chapter in here on how to feel safe. No line that says, it's okay if you're afraid. Nothing about tenderness, or consent, or care. Only control, only sin, only silence. You stare at the cover. One final phrase is inscribed on the spine: Jipuji Sichia et matrimoni, on modesty and marriage. But modesty here doesn't mean humility. It means disappearance. You are meant to disappear. In the dark, in the bed, in yourself. And if you ever cry out, they will hand you this book again and tell you the rules, as if they were written by God himself. But you know better now. You know who wrote this. Not God, not love, but fear. And fear, they taught you, was holier than pleasure. No one says the word. Not at dinner. Not in church. Not even when you ask. They call it duty. They call it sacred. They call it matrimony's burden. But never pleasure. Never want. Never joy. As a girl, you are taught to be quiet. But as a woman, you are taught to be still, especially in bed. Not because it helps you sleep, but because it's holy that way. In hushed tones, passed from nun to bride, from mother to daughter, from priest to penitent, the rules are repeated. Do not show desire. Do not move too much. Do not make a sound unless in pain. You wonder, what if you don't feel anything? They will say, good, you are pure. You are untouched inside, even after being touched. But if you do feel something, if there's warmth, or fire, or aching curiosity, then the sin becomes yours, not his. Yours. You. Remember the confessional, the small wooden box, the smell of dust and old incense, the slit where his voice came through, low and gentle, yet laced with judgment. He asked you, after your wedding night, if you welcomed the marital act. You paused. What was the right answer? If you say no, you're refusing your husband, breaking your vows. If you say yes, you're indulging in carnal delight, which is also a sin. So instead, you say what every good wife is trained to say, I accepted it. He says nothing for a moment, then whispers, did you take any joy in it? Your throat tightens. You want to ask, is joy allowed? Even a little. But you know the answer, and it is no. In the 12th century, the monk Peter Lombard wrote that pleasure, in the marital act, even within wedlock, is venial sin if enjoyed for its own sake. Later, Thomas Aquinas expanded, even in lawful marriage, a man must not seek the pleasure of the flesh, but only the propagation of life. Woman is the field, he is the plow. You've heard these words repeated in sermons, softened, of course, disguised as virtue. You were taught that your body was not for you, and your feelings those sudden flickers of curiosity, those whispers, your skin tries to tell you, must be suppressed. They say, let him take what he needs. Let him lie upon you. Let him finish. And do not ask questions. If you do ask, what does it mean when your heart races? What does it mean when you wake up from dreams your prayers can't erase? What does it mean when you want to touch your own skin and feel something real? They will tell you this is the devil. They will say it's temptation, that you are Eve again listening to serpents, that your longing is your downfall, so you learn to divide yourself. There is your body, and there is your soul. They must not speak to each other. You close your eyes in bed and imagine the ceiling. Count the cracks in the plaster. Try not to move, even when part of you wants to arch, to meet, to respond. You remind yourself, stillness is piety, silence is sainthood, and joy. Joy is dangerous. They told you once about a woman, a real woman, not a story, who admitted she enjoyed lying with her husband. She said it in confession, not knowing. They made her fast for 40 days, bare feet, no meat, no bedsheets, even in winter. Not because she loved sin, but because she loved the feeling of being loved. They said that was too much, that she was no longer modest, no longer humble, no longer fit. So now, you train yourself to forget. You unlearn your own hunger. You learn to accept, not resist, not enjoy, just accept. Like wind through a shutter, like rain on a roof, you lie there and listen to the sound of his breath slowing, the way he rolls away and sleeps. And you stay staring at the wall. You wonder if he noticed you didn't speak, that your hands were clenched beneath the blanket, that your eyes were dry, not closed. And yet tomorrow, at Mass, you will both look the same. The good wife, the dutiful man, because you followed the rules, because you didn't smile, because you didn't sin with your face, or your hips, or your breath, because you obeyed the quietest commandment. Feel nothing, and if you do feel something, never let it show. Your calendar is not your own. Not anymore. There are no anniversaries marked, no hearts in red ink, no secret symbols for days you want to remember. Only X's, and not the kind you dream of. These are the kind scratched through days on parchment, written in cramped script by a tired monk, long before you were born. X for Lent, X for Advent, X for Ember Days, Vigils, Feasts, Fridays, Holy Weeks. You stare at the waxy sheet by candlelight and realize something shocking. More than half the year, you are forbidden to be touched. Not gently, not with love, not even by your own husband. At first you don't believe it. Surely it's exaggerated. But no, your priest has the manual. Your husband has the same. And though he might roll his eyes, when no one is watching, he obeys when someone is. Because disobedience could mean sin, and sin could mean hell, even in marriage. The church divides the year with care, like a butcher carving meat. Each slice of time is labeled holy or not, pure or impure, clean or dangerous. You memorize the forbidden seasons, 40 days of Lent, a time of fasting and abstaining. No meat, no wine, no fleshly pleasures. Advent, another 40 days leading up to Christ's birth. Touching a woman during Advent, scandal. Eves of feast days, nearly 50 scattered across the year. No pleasure the night before, celebrating a saint. Ember days, quarterly sets of Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday, devoted to prayer and penance. Sundays, yes, even those God's Day, is not a day for your body. All of it adds up. 120 plus days, at a minimum. Many manuals list approximately 180 forbidden nights per year. That's more than half your marriage in silence. You are taught, this is holy, because pleasure must be rare. Because too much closeness means too little room for God. Because a woman's body is never neutral. It's either blessed or tempting. Even within wedlock, even behind closed doors, someone is watching. Not physically, spiritually. They say angels turn away when married people lay together. Unless the purpose is conception. Then, and only then, is it holy. And even then only, if it's not during a forbidden season. Your wedding night had no passion, only whispers, prayers, and a perfunctory touch under the covers. He was nervous. You were terrified, but at least it was allowed now, weeks into marriage. The priest reminds your husband, do not approach her during Advent. It is a time of spiritual preparation. He nods. You don't ask what happens if he does. You already know the answer. Guilt, confession, disgrace. Maybe not public, but inside your soul, it burns just as long. And yet, what if you want him to touch you? Not wildly, not shamefully, just gently. Just one hand resting on yours under the blanket on a cold winter's night. You think about reaching for him, but you see the wax seal still unbroken on the confession book, and you don't. You just wait for the next day that isn't painted red on the calendar. Other women warn you, even after childbirth. One says, you must wait 40 days to be clean again. Don't let him touch you before then. Clean. Were you ever dirty? The church says yes. Bleeding makes you impure. Desire makes you suspect. Enjoyment makes you dangerous. You begin to mark the forbidden days in your own head. Not because you believe, but because you fear. Because the line between obedient wife and sinful temptress is so very thin. One misplaced breath, one warm night during Lent, one hungry look after Mass. That's all it takes. You learn to calculate the calendar like a monk, not for feasts, not for births, but for permission. Permission to touch, permission to feel, permission to exist beside your husband without guilt clinging to your skin like sweat. There are women who ignore it. They say it's old superstition. They smile when you ask, but they also pray more than you. Fast, harder, cry longer after confession. Sometimes he turns away from you at night, not because he doesn't love you, but because he does, and loving you wanting you on the wrong day, in the wrong week, during the wrong liturgical moment. That means failing you both, so he prays instead, and you lie beside him like stone, silent, still, forgiven, but never really whole. They told you your body was sacred, but they never let you keep it. It belongs to a schedule. 2 doctrine. 2 rules inked by men who never touched a woman except in penance. And so, day by day, you cross out more squares. Red X, red X, red X. You're not counting down to freedom. You're counting permission. To be close, to be loved, to be real, and, even then, only if it's not Advent, only if it's not Lent, only if it's not Friday, only if God, and the calendar, and the saints, all say yes. Tonight, she may be touched. The confessional is dark, not like night, but like something buried, a kind of darkness that feels thick, almost warm, like secrets held too long. You kneel. The wood creaks beneath your knees, and you wish it didn't. You lower your head, even though no one can see your face, but he can hear your breath. Speak, my child, the priest says gently, through the lattice between you. That thin veil of carved oak that hides nothing at all. And so you begin. At first you say, "What's easy?" I was impatient. I spoke sharply to my mother. I wished for things I don't have. But the silence waits, and waits, until you know what he's really listening for. So you swallow, and your cheeks burn before your voice leaves your lips. I lay with my husband. The words barely make it out. There's no shame in marriage, you've been told. And yet there is shame in how your heart races, in the way your thoughts flicker to the warmth of the bed and the things you did not ask. Permission to enjoy. The priest doesn't say anything. Then his voice, soft but sharp. Did you take pleasure in it? You freeze. How could he ask that? How could you answer that? Did you? You hesitate. And in the silence, you wonder, if you say yes, are you wicked? If you say no, are you lying? And if you say nothing, will that be worse? He continues, calmly. He's read the manuals. He's required to ask, did you lie in the proper position? Did you think lustful thoughts? Did you seek the act for delight, or only for procreation? Each question pierces deeper, not just into your memory, but into places in yourself you didn't know someone else could enter. Not like this. Not with questions so specific, so intimate, it feels more naked than the night itself. You try to speak clearly. You try to tell the truth, but the truth doesn't fit neatly into categories. You don't know if your breath quickened from sin or affection. You don't know if you moved because of desire or pain. You don't even know if you wanted it to happen again or never again. He listens. He hears every stammer, every pause. He fills the gaps with centuries of teachings written by men who never held a woman but felt certain they knew what she should feel. Then comes the final cut. Did you finish? Before your husband? The word isn't even said. Just the idea. Your cheeks flood with heat. You don't know if he's asking about sin or sequence. You don't even know if what you felt counts. So you say, I'm not sure. It's the truth. The penance he gives you isn't harsh. A few Hail Marys, a quiet hour in the chapel, a whisper of forgiveness. But the shame lingers longer than the prayers. You walk out of the box with clean hands, but your soul still hums with confusion. Because how can something sacred feel so scrutinized? How can something that happens in darkness become so exposed in light? Later, you learn this is normal. Confession manuals from the 13th century spell out every question in detail. They instruct the priest to ask you, did you resist at first, then yield too quickly? Did you initiate? Did you show signs of enjoyment? If yes, penance. If no, penance still. Perhaps for other reasons. You begin to see that there is no right way, only the path that causes the least offense to men, to God, to the rules written by both. You share none of this with your husband. He doesn't ask. You suspect he doesn't want to know. But sometimes, you watch him walk to the same confessional box. You wonder what he's asked. You wonder what he confesses. Does the priest ask him if he touched you too softly, too eagerly, too often? Does the priest ask if he took pleasure? Or is it only you whose desire must be justified? You start to censor yourself, not just in confession, but in life. When you feel warmth bloom between your thighs, you press your knees together and say a prayer. When you kiss him too long, you pull away before you reach for more. Not because you're afraid of him, but because you're afraid of what you'll have to say on Sunday. The confessional never leaves you. It lives in your skin, in your silence, in the careful way you touch and don't touch. Even alone, you imagine someone listening. Some women rebel. They go to confess less, or lie softly, omit details. But they do so with fear, because what if that too is a sin? What if your soul is marked not just by action, but by omission? The church fathers say God sees all, even the things you don't understand about yourself. One day, after confession, you sit in the pew and watch a girl no older than 15 walk to the box. You see the blush on her face. You see her fingers twitch with nervousness, and you wonder what she will be asked. You pray she's not ready for the questions, but you also pray she's strong enough to answer them, because in this world, a woman's morality is measured by how much shame she's willing to carry, and how quietly she can do it. You whisper a final prayer, "Lord, forgive me for being made this way," and deep down, you hope he will also forgive the ones who wrote the questions, because they never really heard the answers. Your body is yours, but you know almost nothing about it. You were never shown a diagram, never given a name for what lies between your legs, never told what to expect when it bleeds, or why it might feel warm without warning, or why it aches in ways that words haven't yet learned to describe. And so, you learn by accident, and often, you learn wrong. It begins in childhood. You touch something, curious, soft, hidden, strangely warm, and your hand is slapped away. "Don't do that," your mother snaps. Her voice is sharper than usual. No explanation, just shame. You tuck the memory away, not just of the act, but of her reaction. Something inside you has been labeled dirty, and you don't even know what it is yet. Later, when you bleed for the first time, you think you're dying. The blood stains your shift. The ache curls your stomach. You stare down in horror when you finally whisper it to your mother. She doesn't look surprised. She hands you cloth, tells you to sit still, tells you to keep quiet, and that's it. No mention of why it happens. No mention of what it means. Only that it will return, and that you must be careful now, because men will know. No. What? You're not sure. But the way she says it makes you afraid to ask. When you marry, you think things will be explained. You think anyone will finally say what the body does, and why. But no one does. The priest speaks in metaphors. Union of souls, fruit of the womb, wifely duties. Your mother is even more vague. She pats your hand the night before your wedding and says, "Just do what he asks. It will be over soon." You want to ask, what will be over? But you nod instead. Because by now, you've learned that questions make people uncomfortable, and they never answer anyway. So when the wedding night comes, and your husband lifts your shift, you are frozen between fear and silence. You don't know where to look, what to do, what he's going to do, and worse, you don't know why it hurts. He says nothing. Afterward, he sleeps, and you stare at the ceiling, wondering if something inside you has broken. No one told you there would be blood again. No one told you that something so sacred could feel so much like injury. You ask nothing the next day. You smile, as instructed. You begin to play your role, and yet your body remains a puzzle with half the pieces missing. You don't know where certain aches come from. You don't know why you sometimes feel heat in your belly just watching him roll his sleeves. You don't know what that tightness means, that flutter behind your ribs. When his hand brushes your hip for no reason at all, you just know you shouldn't mention it. Because good wives don't feel things for themselves. They receive, they endure, they stay quiet. When you gather with the other women, you listen more than you speak. Over time, in fragments, you collect clues. An older woman warns, "Never lie on your back too long after. That's how babies come." Another says, "If you drink sage tea, it might delay the bleeding." A third, eyes wide, whispers, "There's a spot inside. I think if you press it right." They all fall silent. Someone laughs nervously. The moment passes, but the curiosity remains. You write the words in your mind, like little sacred spells. Each phrase a flicker of power in a world that gives you none. Books, forbidden, at least the ones that speak plainly. The medical tomes are in Latin. The men read them. They debate uteruses and humors, while you wash your linens in cold water, and wonder if the pain in your belly is punishment or prophecy. You hear words you don't understand. Womb suffocation, Venus fire, hysteria. They say it's because women are ruled by water, and water is unstable. They say your womb wanders if unsatisfied. They say your emotions come from your uterus, not your heart. They say you are made from Adam's rib, a bent rib, crooked by design. And still, no one explains why your body sometimes wakes you in the middle of the night with throbbing questions it cannot name. In secret, you begin to explore. One night, when no one is around, you let your hand drift lower. You touch what no one has named, what no one claimed, and the sensation startles you. It's not shameful, it's not painful, it's yours, and yet the guilt floods you before the warmth can settle. Because the voice in your head, the one shaped by sermons, says God is watching, and he is not pleased. So you stop, and you confess it, and you feel clean again, but also hollow, as if you gave something away before you had the chance to understand it. Years pass. You bear children. You bleed more times than you can count. Your breasts ache. Your hips widen. And still, no one has said the word clitoris to you. No one told you that the flutter you felt as a girl was not sin, but nerve endings. No one told you that pleasure is not a crime, that your body is not an enemy, that your curiosity was never a threat to salvation. No one told you, because no one told them. You begin to realize something heavy. The church has taught you how to dress, how to walk, how to sit, speak, kneel, and breathe. It has taught you how to give birth, how to serve, how to endure, but it has never taught you how to know yourself, because a woman who knows her body is a woman harder to control. A woman who knows what feels good is a woman who might ask for it. A woman who understands how conception works is a woman who might say no. And so, you were taught nothing. Deliberately, lovingly, systematically. But now you teach your daughters differently. When the first blood comes, you do not shush them. You light a candle. You hold their hand. You say, your body is wise. Listen to it. And when they grow older, you tell them where the ache begins and where it can end in warmth, not shame. You tell them names for every part, because to name something is to claim it. And you promise them that curiosity is not a sin, it is a form of survival. You never had a guide, so now you become one. You aren't even sure it has a name. That's strange. Fluttering collapse inside you, the rush behind your knees. The warmth that builds and then disappears, leaving your chest heaving, your body stilled like the eye of a storm. It happens rarely, accidentally, almost always in silence. And afterward, you wonder, was that wrong? Because no one has ever spoken of it aloud. Not your mother, not your priest, not even the other women, except in whispers, and only ever with half smiles that vanish quickly. You are a medieval woman. Your pleasure is a rumor, and even the church isn't sure it exists. In fact, they've been arguing about it for centuries. You hear that some say a woman must feel pleasure in order to conceive, that without it, without her seed rising to meet the man's, a child cannot form, and you wonder if that's what happened last spring when you bled but did not carry. Did your body fail to enjoy it enough? Is that your fault? Or is this just another guess from men in robes who know how to read Latin, but not how to listen? The philosophers are split. Galen, that ancient Greek everyone quotes, insists that both sexes must reach pleasure for conception to occur, like two candles lighting each other, but others disagree. Later thinkers, mostly clerics, say no, a woman's part is passive. She is the field, not the plow. They write about you as if you are an idea, not a person, not someone who feels heat behind her spine when her husband removes his belt slowly, not someone whose thighs tremble for reasons she doesn't dare name. The medical texts you never see, because they're in libraries for monks, not wives, speak of female seed, but with uncertainty. Some believe it's real, some say it's irrelevant, some say it's dangerous, because if you can enjoy it, then surely you might want to enjoy it again, and not just with your husband. What? A terrifying thought to the men who write the rules. So, the simplest solution: deny it, Pretend it doesn't exist, make it unspoken, and eventually, make you believe it isn't real. And it almost works. When your body responds, when the friction becomes heat, and the heat becomes pressure, and the pressure becomes something you can't quite describe, you ignore it. You tighten your jaw. You breathe slow and shallow. You tell yourself this is what wives do. You are the vessel, not the flame. You let him finish. You wipe the sweat from your collarbone. You close your eyes and try not to wish for something more. But in the bathhouse, when the steam fogs every mirror and the women finally stop speaking like saints, you hear it. A story, a slip of a sentence. Someone mentions that her thighs shook so hard she thought her soul was leaving her body. And the other women nod, not in judgment, not in shame, but in recognition. You want to ask, what was that? When does it happen? How do I make it return? But you say nothing, because the woman who admits she wants pleasure is already halfway to being called a whore. The men speak of your body in courts and sermons. They say you are leaky, sinful, emotional, unstable. They say, too much pleasure will poison your womb. They say, too little makes you barren. They say it's your duty to please your husband, but not your right to feel anything yourself. So you are trapped between paradoxes. A woman who enjoys it is dangerous. A woman who does not enjoy it is defective. And a woman who even asks is unnatural. Sometimes, your husband notices your silence. He kisses your shoulder and asks, "Did it feel good for you?" And you lie, because the truth would be more dangerous than disappointing. What would you even say? That it felt like something was almost there, but not quite. That you wanted to move differently, but were afraid to. That you touched yourself once, just to understand, and felt something like lightning in your spine that made you cry afterward, because no one told you your body could do that. No, you say yes, you smile, and it's over. But sometimes, rarely, you allow yourself to remember to search for it again, alone, in silence. In darkness, your hand moves slowly, tentatively. You try to find the rhythm, the pressure, the angle, and when it comes, when your body clenches, and your breath catches, and your thighs pull inward, as if they are hiding a secret to holy forelight, you still wonder, is this allowed? But for a moment, you do not care, because it is yours, not his, not theirs, not the church's, not the midwife's, not the priest's, just yours. Later, in confession, you consider mentioning it. But how would you phrase it? "Bless me, Father, for I've felt something." You don't. You say something small instead, like gossip or envy. Because pleasure is not just a physical act, it is a political one. To feel joy in your body is to reclaim it, and that was never part of the design. You realize something painful. They didn't just hide the truth from you. They built a world where your curiosity was a threat, where your pleasure was a myth, where your body was a battlefield, and every twitch of delight was another reason to be watched. But in the silence between sermons, in the breaths you hold at night, you begin to win LEARN. You begin to remember what your body has always known, that joy is not shame, that desire is not sin, that your body was never the enemy, it was simply never allowed to speak. You aren't even sure it has a name. That's strange. Fluttering collapse inside you, the rush behind your knees, the warmth that builds and then disappears, leaving your chest heaving, your body stilled like the eye of a storm. It happens rarely, accidentally, almost always in silence, and afterward, you wonder, was that wrong? Because no one has ever spoken of it aloud. Not your mother, not your priest, not even the other women, except in whispers, and only ever with half smiles that vanish quickly. You are a medieval woman. Your pleasure is a rumor, and even the church isn't sure it exists. In fact, they've been arguing about it for centuries. You hear that some say a woman must feel pleasure in order to conceive, that without it, without her seed rising, to meet the man's, a child cannot form. And you wonder if that's what happened last spring when you bled, but did not carry. Did your body fail to enjoy it enough? Is that your fault? Or is this just another guess from men in robes who know how to read Latin, but not how to listen? The philosophers are split. Galen, that ancient Greek everyone quotes, insists that both sexes must reach pleasure for conception to occur, like two candles lighting each other. But others disagree. Later thinkers, mostly clerics, say no, a woman's part is passive. She is the field, not the plow. They write about you as if you are an idea, not a person, not someone who feels heat behind her spine when her husband removes his belt slowly, not someone whose thighs tremble for reasons she doesn't dare name. The medical texts you never see, because they're in libraries for monks, not wives, speak of female seed, but with uncertainty. Some believe it's real, some say it's irrelevant, some say it's dangerous, because if you can enjoy it, then surely you might want to enjoy it again, and not just with your husband. What? A terrifying thought to the men who write the rules. So the simplest solution: deny it, pretend it doesn't exist, make it unspoken, and eventually make you believe it isn't real. And it almost works. When your body responds, when the friction becomes heat, and the heat becomes pressure, and the pressure becomes something you can't quite describe, you ignore it. You tighten your jaw, you breathe slow and shallow. You tell yourself this is what wives do. You are the vessel, not the flame. You let him finish. You wipe the sweat from your collarbone. You close your eyes and try not to wish for something more. But in the bathhouse, when the steam fogs every mirror and the women finally stop speaking like saints, you hear it. A story, a slip of a sentence. Someone mentions that her thighs shook so hard she thought her soul was leaving her body, and the other women nod, not in judgment, not in shame, but in recognition. You want to ask, what was that? When does it happen? How do I make it return? But you say nothing, because the woman who admits she wants pleasure is already halfway to being called a whore. The men speak of your body in courts and sermons. They say you are leaky, sinful, emotional, unstable. They say too much pleasure will poison your womb. They say too little makes you barren. They say it's your duty to please your husband, but not your right to feel anything yourself. So you are trapped between paradoxes. A woman who enjoys it is dangerous. A woman who does not enjoy it is defective. And a woman who even asks is unnatural. Sometimes your husband notices your silence. He kisses your shoulder and asks, "Did it feel good for you?" And you lie, because the truth would be more dangerous than disappointing. What would you even say? That it felt like something was almost there, but not quite. That you wanted to move differently, but were afraid to. That you touched yourself once, just to understand, and felt something like lightning in your spine that made you cry afterward because no one told you your body could do that. No. You say yes. You smile, and it's over. But sometimes, rarely, you allow yourself to remember, to search for it again, alone, in silence, in darkness. Your hand moves slowly, tentatively. You try to find the rhythm, the pressure, the angle dot. And when it comes, when your body clenches, and your breath catches, and your thighs pull inward, as if they are hiding a secret to holy for light, you still wonder, is this allowed? But for a moment, you do not care, because it is yours, not his, not theirs, not the church's, not the midwife's, not the priest's, just yours. Later, in confession, you consider mentioning it, but how would you phrase it? "Bless me, Father, for I've felt something." You don't. You say something small instead, like gossip or envy, because pleasure is not just a physical act, it is a political one. To feel joy in your body is to reclaim it, and that was never part of the design. You realize something painful. They didn't just hide the truth from you. They built a world where your curiosity was a threat, where your pleasure was a myth, where your body was a battlefield. and every twitch of delight was another reason to be watched. But in the silence between sermons, in the breaths you hold at night, you begin to unlear. You begin to remember what your body has always known, that joy is not shame, that desire is not sin, that your body was never the enemy, it was simply never allowed to speak. You watch the candle melt lower, its wax dripping like time itself, slow, sticky, and inevitable. The chamber has gone quiet, too quiet, and still, your stomach tightens with dread. Not because of danger, not because of violence, but because you know what tonight means. It's your husband's turn to come to your bed, and you are not ready. Not in your body, not in your mind, not in your soul, but in this world. You don't need to shout no. You only need to cough, or wince, or sigh softly, and place the back of your hand gently against your forehead. I think I may be coming down with something, just enough to be spared. For now, you've learned the patterns, the quiet codes, how to time your monthly bleeding, so it seems to last a little longer than it truly does. How to feign fatigue, how to pray with extra devotion. Fasting helps, you tell yourself, not just for the soul, but for strategy, because the church gives you allies. Lent, Advent, saints' days, vigils, days, when carnal relations are forbidden under threat of sin, so you cling to them like driftwood in a storm. Still, guilt clings to you harder. You know your role. The sermons made it clear, you are not to tempt, not to resist, not to desire, but not to deny, either. You are the obedient wife, the open door, the silent shadow that welcomes him, and yet, some nights your chest grows heavy with the weight of performance. You lie in bed, eyes shut, pretending to sleep before the door even creaks. Other nights, you murmur your prayers louder than usual, letting him hear the depth of your piety, and, when that fails, when he turns toward you anyway, you summon the headache, the imaginary ache behind your temples, the phantom chills in your bones, the slight wince as you shift. He believes it. Maybe, or maybe he just doesn't ask. You aren't alone in this theater. The older wives taught you early. They whispered it over linens and laundry. There are ways to avoid your husband without angering God. One swears by strong vinegar on her skin, a sour smell no man wants near. Another insists on garlic breath. Another plays dead. Some fast until they are too weak to be touched. And still, they pray afterward, out of guilt, out of habit, out of fear, because even refusal can carry spiritual weight. The priests do not understand, or maybe they do, and pretend not to. In confession, you admit only fragments. I did not welcome my husband as a wife should. You don't explain the anxiety or the small tremor in your limbs when he begins to undress. You don't say how your skin recoils even when he's gentle, because that would be selfish, wouldn't it? You are told to submit, and if it hurts, offer it up. A small suffering, a woman's duty, a quiet martyrdom. Sometimes you wonder what it would feel like to want it, to want him to lie in bed, not as an object of expectation, but as a participant in pleasure. You've heard the rare stories, couples who laugh behind closed doors, women who reach for their husbands first. But those stories feel like songs in a foreign tongue, pretty, but impossible to sing yourself. You've trained your body too well to flinch, to delay, to disappear under the blanket of holy obligation. Guilt is your shadow. It walks beside you in the chapel, in the kitchen, even in the garden. When you kneel among the herbs, pretending to weed while your thoughts stray, you feel guilty when you avoid his touch. Guilty when you imagine someone else's. Guilty when you wonder if life was supposed to be more than this. Guilty when your body says no. Guiltier when it says yes. There is no middle ground, only silence and shame. But shame doesn't stop the headaches. The real ones, this time. The kind that form from too many nights of fear, too many days of pretending. You are not made of stone. You are flesh. You are nerves and blood and breath, and you are tired of being a duty, a vessel, a good Christian wife who lives by the calendar and dies a little more with each reluctant embrace. In your darker moments, you imagine telling him the truth, that you dread his touch, that it makes your stomach churn, not with love, but with restraint, that when he kisses you, your mind goes somewhere else entirely, that your body flattens under his, not in welcome, but in escape. You imagine telling him, but you don't, because he is not cruel, he is not evil, he simply thinks you are his, because that's what everyone told him, and you were told the same. So tonight, you press your fingers to your temple and whisper a soft moan. He hears it, pauses. You feel him shift in the bed beside you, a sigh, a weight, and then stillness. It worked, for now. You feel relief, followed by guilt, followed by a single tear that slides across your cheek and disappears into the pillow. You close your eyes and try to dream of silence, because that, too, is part of being a wife. You open the Bible not with hunger, but with fear, because you already know what's waiting inside. Not comfort, not peace, but the beginning of your shame. Her name is Eve, and she looks nothing like you, yet her story has been braided into your spine since before you could spell the word sin. It always starts the same way, a garden, a snake, a bite, but what they emphasize is not the fruit, not the serpent, it's her, it's you. You're told she let desire in, she wanted too much, she reached for what was forbidden, and for that, she doomed humanity. So every time you feel a flutter in your belly, at a glance, a smile, a thought you shouldn't have, you swallow it down, because want is dangerous, because desire is disobedience, because pleasure is punishment and waiting. You've been taught that your very body, its curves, its softness, its scent was made to tempt, and must therefore be punished for it. At Mass, the priest warns the men to be strong, because women are because even holy men can fall at the sight of bare ankles. The blame is always directed, outward and downward, to the women in the pews, to the women at the market, to the women washing clothes by the stream, not because they try to seduce, but because their existence is considered inherently seductive. You, just standing still, are already a risk. Even the saints echo it. One monk wrote that a woman's voice could stir lust more quickly than a devil's whisper. Another claimed that to look into a woman's eyes was to look into the gateway of sin, and yet they expected you to bear children, please your husband, be beautiful, but not too beautiful, desirable, but not willing, pure but always available. How are you meant to exist inside this contradiction? You notice how men walk past you in the street and avert their eyes, or worse, linger. If they feel temptation, the sin is yours. If they lose control, your skirt was too short, even if it touched your shoes. Even the paintings in the cathedral show it. Eve, once again, her body naked, but her fault loud, a serpent, winds around her ankle, but no one sees the snake, only the flesh. In confession, you don't know what to say. You haven't done anything, but your thoughts, your dreams, do those count? You ask the priest if it's sinful to feel warmth in your body at night when you're alone. He asks if you touched yourself. You say no, but it doesn't matter. The thought alone puts you in spiritual danger. He tells you to pray, to fast, to cleanse your mind. So you go home and scrub your skin until it burns. Even among other women, there's little comfort. The older ones repeat the teachings because they're afraid to question them. Men are weak. It's our job to help them stay holy. Don't let your husband sin because of your body. So you learn to walk a certain way, to keep your eyes low, to hide your smile behind your sleeve, to be pleasant, but not flirtatious, to serve, but not invite, to endure your body as if it were a dangerous animal tethered to your soul. And if a man strays, if he seeks another, or worse, the whispers will circle back to you. She wasn't attentive. She tempted him. She wasn't enough. There is no right way to exist as a woman who breathes and feels. Only rules, warnings, walls. The church calls it modesty, calls it virtue. But to you, it feels like constant surveillance. Every smile is a liability. Every curve is a threat. Every emotion is a test, so you try to disappear, even as you must remain visible enough to be married, to be fertile, to be accepted. At night, you curl into yourself and whisper apologies to no one in particular, for thinking, for feeling, for being born into a body that was declared guilty before it ever sinned. You begin to believe it. Not just the rules, but the guilt. You see yourself through Eve's shadow. And every time your heart stirs, you wonder if you're reaching for the fruit. You wonder if you're the danger, not to others, but to your own soul. And yet, somewhere, deep inside, beneath the centuries of shame, a small ember glows, a flicker of rebellion, a question. What if Eve wasn't the villain? What if she was simply curious, human? What if desire wasn't a curse, but a language, a fire not meant to destroy but to warm? You press that question down. You are not ready to let it burn freely, but it's there, and it's yours, even if the church never lets you say it aloud. You thought the convent walls would protect you from stares, from expectations, from men, not from yourself. They told you the abbey was a sanctuary, a place where silence is holy and temptation cannot enter. But silence has its own dangers, doesn't it? You quickly learn that the thick stone walls don't keep everything out. Sometimes, they trap things in. Your first morning at the convent begins with bells, a sound so pure, it makes your heart ache. You rise from the cold bed, not yet used, to linen without lace, 2 floors without rugs. No husband will visit you here. No priest will guide your first night. And yet, you sense that your body is still not your own. During prayer, your knees dig into the stone, your back aches, your hands tremble with devotion and doubt. The abbess tells you that devotion is the only cure for that other kind of desire. She doesn't name it, but you know what she means. You've heard whispers. Some nuns walk too close to each other. Others disappear together for long moments in the herb garden or the library alcoves. A glance lingers too long. A giggle hides something deeper. A hand brushes another hand and jerks back like it touched fire. You're not supposed to look. But how can you not? You live in a house of women, bodies everywhere. Softness, warmth, movement, and yet any mention of those feelings is called corruption, even among the holy. One night, during Lent, you wake to soft sounds, not prayer, not weeping, something else. You bury your face in the pillow, not just out of modesty, but out of confusion. You thought you came here to escape sin. But sin, it seems, wears a habit too. At morning prayers, no one says anything, but the air is heavy. The abbess's eyes scan the room, like they can pierce through fabric and find your thoughts. She warns of invisible devils that dwell in idle hands. She orders extra fasts, longer silence. She rearranges sleeping quarters. Garden walls are reinforced, not because outsiders threaten the sisters, but because the real danger is believed to grow from within. You start noticing more rules. No sitting too close. No walking in pairs unless supervised. No lingering in the chapel after dark. You're given texts to read, St. Jerome's warnings, Augustine's shame-filled confessions, and cautionary tales of fallen nuns who felt too much. They always end the same: punished, exiled, or disappeared. For the good of the order, you try to focus on prayer, on work, on the slow and sacred rhythm of the hours. But questions bloom like weeds. If you're here to flee the world, why does the world still live inside your chest? Why does your heart still race when a sister sings too sweetly? Why do you feel more alive in silence than you ever did in speech? And why is all of it called sin? The confessional is supposed to be safe. A dark booth. A whisper. A surrender. But when you try to speak the thing you carry inside, a glance, a dream, a wish, the priest tightens his jaw. These urges come from idleness, he says. From Satan testing your discipline. He tells you to beat your chest too fast for 3 days, to repeat 10 paternosters and pray for detachment. He doesn't ask why you felt what you felt. He only tells you that you shouldn't have. Some of the older sisters confess more often. You wonder what secrets they've locked away for years. You wonder if any of them are free, or if they've simply mastered the art of burying longing under layers of ritual. The garden becomes your quiet place, not because it's free from surveillance, but because the flowers don't judge. There, among the rosemary and rue, you let yourself remember touch, not lust, but warmth, not sin, but softness. Even that, they say, can lead you astray. And so, you walk carefully, not just with your steps, but with your mind. You learn to shield your thoughts the way you shield your skin, layered, hidden, penitent. You fear even your dreams, because they come without warning and leave behind guilt. The body, you are told, is the battleground, and the mind, a traitor. Years pass. The outside world forgets your name, but inside, you carry echoes of yourself. The girl who once wondered, felt ached. You start to forget her. You begin to believe that holiness means erasing her completely. Until one day, you find an old letter tucked inside a prayer book. It's unsigned, but the words ring too true to be fiction. Sister, I have prayed, I have fasted, but still, I feel. I do not think God made me wrong. Your breath catches. For a moment, you're not alone. For a moment, you wonder if sin is not in the feeling but in the fear. You fold the letter carefully and place it back, not to keep it hidden, but to let it stay. Proof that in the quietest places, even under vow, desire still breathes. And maybe, just maybe, you are not wicked for feeling it, just human. You smell smoke. It curls under your door before dawn, dragging with it the sound of shouting, not angry, but afraid. Your heart skips, not because you know what happened, but because you've heard it before. Another woman, another accusation, another reason to look away. They say she was a midwife, that she helped too many women give birth, that she knew too much about herbs, about hips, about how to whisper a blessing while slipping crushed sage under the tongue. They say she looked too long at Father Ale, and he looked back. They say she spoke too confidently, and laughed too freely. They say she burned. The worst part isn't that she screamed, it's that she didn't. She stood still, let the flames come to her, her eyes never blinking. And in that stillness, they saw proof. Proof that she was not afraid, because she was not human. Proof that desire is not just dangerous, but demonic. You were taught that witches lie with devils, that they ride broomsticks across the sky and boil frogs in cauldrons. But you begin to understand, the real fear was never magic. It was knowledge, and power, and pleasure, especially when those things belonged to a woman. The church warns you, lust is the gateway sin, and women, lusty women, invite Satan to supper just by wanting to know their bodies, wanting to say no, wanting to enjoy. That's all it takes. A woman who wants becomes a woman who burns. In the margins of parchment scrolls, monks scribble little images, women with horns, women with tails, sometimes naked, always writhing. They say these are temptresses, but they look like you, only freer, and that frightens them. You recall how Marguerite the laundress was accused last year of dancing in the woods. Dancing, they said, the devil played the flute. They said her hips moved too smoothly for a Christian. She was whipped publicly, and after that, she never spoke again. She keeps her eyes on the ground now, even when no one's watching, just in case. You begin to understand why nuns walk with hands folded, why widows cover their hair in thick veils, why girls stop laughing after their first bleeding, because silence is protection, stillness is armor, Obedience is survival. And yet you can't forget the little things. The way the accused healer whispered a prayer that sounded more like a lullaby. Way she touched your wrist the day your fever broke. She didn't ask permission. She didn't say, "May I?" She just knew. And because of that knowing, she died. It makes you question what you've been told. If pleasure is evil, why was it created? If knowledge is danger, why does it feel like light? If women are weak, why are they feared? You don't ask. Out loud. Not ever. But inside, the questions grow like wild mint between the cracks of stone. You're warned not to speak with the old women at the edge of town, the ones with wild gardens and silver hair. You're told they mutter curses and turn milk sour. But one of them once gave you a small bundle of dried leaves and told you it would ease your cramping. You used it. It worked. You never told a soul. Not even your confessor. Because even healing can be heresy. There is no safe way to be a woman who understands her body, her herbs, her hunger. So you pretend not to know when other girls whisper in corners. You look away when they pass small pouches of fennel seeds and motherwort. You hum a hymn to drown out your own thoughts. The trials never really stop. They change. Form today, it's fire. Tomorrow it might be exile. Or worse, marriage to a man you fear. Because if you're not a witch, you must become a wife. Those are the only roles for women who bleed. Even the saints tremble at the thought of a woman who wants more. Not just to serve, but to seek. Not just to birth, but to choose. Not just to follow, but to know. The word, which becomes a catch-all for any woman who steps outside the circle, drawn for her. So you learn to live with your fire hidden. You still help when a neighbor girl bleeds too long. You still crush herbs quietly in a corner of your kitchen. You still feel things. A spark when a hand brushes yours. A warmth when you dream, but you bury them deep. Because being seen could be fatal. And when you walk past the pyre, still smoldering, you don't flinch. You just lower your eyes, say a prayer, and keep moving. Because, even in ashes, you know that woman once dared to want, and that, in the end, was her greatest sin. A song, a story, a runaway couple. It gives you hope than fear. Punishment is swift. You hear it in the market square, just as the midday bells toll 7 strokes. A soft melody floats beneath the vendor's calls, not hawking goods, but weaving, longing into the air. It's a song whispered by a street musician, a lute's tremor, a voice lifted gently under the sun. And in that song, you hear something you nearly forgot. You could feel possibility. The words speak of 2 lovers, a simple maid and the baker's apprentice, who liked each other too much. So they ran away under a moon that looked like a silver coin. They married in secret. She stitched him a simple linen robe. He carved her a ring from hazelnut wood. They never got caught until they came back home. The baker's father declared them sins in broad daylight. The maiden's aunt fainted from the scandal, and in the end, the couple escaped on foot, holding hands, laughing despite fear. You'll listen again. You'll lean against the whey tub near the dairy stall. You close your eyes at the final verse. Let the saints judge their hearts, but we love as God wills still. The ache in your chest loosens. You realize you haven't had a thought that big since you were 16. Not in words, not in melody, in the quiet pulse of your own skin. The second time you hear it, you hum along. But when the musician meets your eyes, you lower your own. Because bitter or worse, because the church preaches that earthly songs can stir the soul toward sin. Before the 3rd verse ends, someone shouts, "Silence that noise," and the lute is snapped shut. Finger chords breaking in a snap that resonates through the alley. The musician flees, the crowd scatters, the melody dies. Still you carry it. You carry hope in the hollow of your ribcage. You carry fear in the shape of silence on your lips. That evening, an older neighbor whispers to you. They say they took refuge in the woods, married under birches, by a secret spring. You glance toward the lane on which she lives. A narrow door under ivy, a hidden garden beyond. Your breath catches. What if you could just go, leave everything, find someone who doesn't demand silence? But then you remember the baker's father beating the apprentice's door open, the apprentices strapped to the stocks, the maiden's father seizing her dowry, renouncing her as plague. Punishment is swift, public, final. You begin to sing the tune softly to yourself at night, barely awake, half remembering, letting it fill. But when you do, you feel the knot in your belly twist, because sin lives in fragrant thoughts. The third night, you dream. You are the maiden. He is your lover. You clasp hands under stern oak trees. The forest murmurs above. You wake with your heart pounding. You feel ridiculous and terrified. If you confess this dream, they will say your soul is haunted. If you speak this love, you are dishonored. You press your lips together. You clamp your fingers around your hands. You pray for forgiveness. You don't understand. Days pass, and rumors travel. A runaway couple is caught in a village to counties north. The girl is flogged until she begs mercy. The boy is shackled and sold to soldiers. Once again, they whisper their names like warnings. Don't dream of escape. You feel the curl of fear in your stomach, hope trembling on a thread, but that flicker still lives. You start noticing other signs. A woman picking berries touches her husband's hand too firmly. A shepherd sings under the stars, his voice carrying beyond the flock. A pair of youngsters carve initials into a church bench, innocent, hopefully oblivious to the scrape of wood on stone. You feel envy. You feel yearning, not for scandal, but for permission. Permission to live your heart as loudly as the bells toll. At night, you trace the melody on wooden beams. Whisper it to the moon. Let it fold into your dreams. For a moment, you feel alive, possibly dangerous, possibly free, and then you remember. You remember the baker's father's words. A woman who runs away must be cursed. Let her walk barefoot, in sackcloth. Let her husband pay her mischief tax before he may hold her again. The threat is more than land rights or sin. It is blackmail. Body for silence. You have not forgotten. Still, you carry the melody inside you. It becomes a lullaby, a prayer for courage, a hymn for unspoken longing. You sing it low, just for yourself. We love as God wills, still, despite rules, despite punishment, despite everything. One evening, a traveler comes to town. He claims to have seen a village where lovers were placed. Stone masks on the cathedral door with carved hearts. And he says they never faced the bishop. The community protected them. You feel stunned, so love could exist beyond punishment. So love could be protected. Your chest aches with a fragile light. You close your eyes, pinch your forehead because danger and hope taste the same. And yet, you begin to hum again, soft, gentle, fierce, not as rebellion, not as sin, but as memory of something that might have been yours. If only. Fear wasn't always the last note. Some women are sold to brothels, others confess weekly. Either way, it's rarely a choice. You wake this morning to the steady clatter of shovels outside, stones being dropped into the well, a normal sound, but your heart stirs. Because in this village, vigilance is religion. You finish your bread, dry and stale, and step outside. You notice 3 new maidens at the edge of the square, clad in plain shifts. No jewelry, no laughter. Eyes down, bodies tense. They were purchased last night for the brothel that stands just beyond the tavern's squat wall. You quiet your breath. You weren't told they'd bring women here most of the year. The brothel is whispered about in hush-toned warnings. If you disobey, that could be your fate. But when the cloaked men escort the girls through the gate, they become spectacle. Girls sold to brothels don't protest, not because they've given consent, because consent isn't theirs. Some families sell them to pay debts, drought, death, famine. Some are stolen, Some accused of immorality because a neighbor heard rumors, and even when the women weren't married, they are marked by their gender. You remember one of them, a girl nearly your age. They said she was too bold in church. They will pay you to keep you quiet, someone whispered, and they did. Now, she stands there in the square, hands bound, devoted to strangers. You turn to go inside, but then remember, there is another path. A priest's door is always open. Confession lines are long. Women stand each week, trembling, entering the lightless wood booth, one by one. They speak the hidden words of their bodies. I looked lustfully at my cousin. I felt pleasure too long. I denied my husband and felt fear more than duty. Penance follows. Fasting, whipping, bread and water. Sometimes sin does not forgive easily. Even marriage doesn't protect you. You swallow hard, because both paths, brothel or confession, are traps. One punishes you physically in a public hall. The other punishes you spiritually in a silent booth. One sells your body. The other scrutinizes it. Both tell you you're guilty. Both tell you that you had no right to your own flesh. You feel the weight in your chest like a heavy stone. There's an irony here. The brothel is licensed. The confessional is sacred. One is taxed by town council. The other is mandated by the church. But both reduce you a body for profit, or a body for penance. You were taught that marriage is your shield. But shields can't guard against shame or silence. You know the brothel's name. It's called La Maison des Sœurs, a cruel joke. The doors are painted red. Lanterns glow at dusk. Curtains fall softly to hushed commerce behind. You hear women crying at dawn.